Hello everyone, welcome to another special mental health video. Today's one is again a bit different to some of the other ones we've done. We're focusing more on women in football, as you'll see from my guests. We'll give an introduction in a minute. But one of the things I've discovered, from my point of view, being a suicide survivor, is men's mental health is very prevalent in the game. We all talk about it, and as much as we are trying to promote women's football and women in the game, women's mental health within football isn't really spoken about, or at least it isn't from my experience. So I wanted to get some people on to kind of have a chat about this, and that's why these lovely people have joined me. So we'll do a bit of introduction, and then we'll sort of start talking about the subject at hand. So Lorraine, you're in my top left. So brief introduction from yourself.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Taylor. I've been going to football since 1975, or professional football, but I've been standing on the sidelines watching my dad play when I was younger. Um, Seen a lot of changes, and yeah, football's in my blood. I love my football, but it's my happy place. It's where I go after a stressful week. So yeah.
Wonderful. And Zoe, you're next on my list. So obviously, lots of people will know who you are, but for those that don't, just a brief introduction for yourself.
Yeah, I'm Zoe Webber. I am the executive director at Norwich City, and I'm also on the board of trustees of the Community Sports Foundation. Um, I've worked in football now for 25 years, so quite a long time. Like Lorraine, I've probably seen quite a lot of change over that time. Um, and yeah, I guess a bit the same, I've grown up, football's kind of always been in the family. We've always, gone to games here, there, and everywhere. And yeah, I guess for me, it's some of it has been about a transition from something being a hobby and a passion to then being your day job as well. And that's sometimes quite difficult to navigate.
And Nicole, last and certainly not least, introduction for yourself, please.
So I'm Nicol Nicholls. I am a Her Game 2 ambassador. I am an ambassador for Norwich City Women, and I'm also a girls grassroots coach. So I loved football as a child. It was everything. Absolutely loved it, lived it, breathed it. And then I hit my teenage years and there was nothing. So I fell out of love with football for many, many years. And it wasn't until about 2.5, 3 years ago when my daughters fell in love with football that love came back. It's still a little bit of a love-hate relationship sometimes, but football, especially as some of you will know, recently has got me through losing my mum like 5, 6 weeks ago. If I didn't have my football support family, I didn't have going to football, it would have been a lot tougher to deal with.
Obviously that's quite a painful thing you brought up, and it's quite recent for you. And obviously I don't want to dwell on that kind of thing, but kind of a question to start all of you, really, and I'll let each of you go in turn. Does do you find that football is like does help you get through those times, or do you find sometimes that it can often is it a distraction to you, or is it actually that you do enjoy it and it helps you forget? Because they're kind of to me they're two different things. So I'm intrigued to find out when you do go through those tough times, is it just that it's a distraction, or does it genuinely help you? So Lorraine, I'll pick on you
Yeah,
first.
I I think it's genuinely a help. Um, in 2019, my friend Dave died in a horrific car accident, which was I saw. I actually saw it happen, and with PTSD and everything. But it was my football family. It was the football family that got me through everything, and actually, it was help. The football club helped as well. I mean, Tom Smith reached out to me. Members of the club came to Dave's funeral, and the whole football family rallied round because Dave was such a big part of Norwich City as well. Everybody knew him. So if I don't think I'd have got through everything without my football family, and I've actually made friends from unfortunately a tragedy. I've actually I'm now on the trust board because Robin came to the funeral and I got speaking to Robin, and that things moved on from there. So yeah, football. I mean, it can actually be heartbreaking some days, when we lose or what have you. But on the whole, it's not always just about the football. It's about before and after, and the people you sit with. Yeah, it's a huge part, and I'm probably not expressing myself as well, but it's it's helped me an awful lot. There's so many more positives about going to football than there are negatives. There are negatives, the misogyny, the sexism, the social media aspect, which I can go in, I'll talk about maybe later. But on the whole, the football family and football in general is a huge help to mental health.
And Zoe, from your point of view, obviously you talked in your introduction about moving from it being, I think, traditional before we were recording, that you moving from a hobby to being your job. In terms of when you struggled, obviously I know Stuart was little when he was doing his Everest climb, had some struggles. I know there's been some other things. Has football been a distraction to you, or has it helped when you've enjoyed it, when you haven't enjoyed it? What's it been like for you?
Yeah, I think like Lorraine said that, no matter where you are, whether you work in a club, whether you support the club, when you're in that kind of football family, you always feel like you have that support from the people around you. And I think that, within the club itself, we focus very much on kind of looking after each other, because brutally honest, it's a really tough environment. You're going to work every day, and you've got thousands and thousands of people who have an opinion on every decision you make, what you're doing that day. Why, there'll be people going, well, why are they doing this, why are they doing that? And and I think social media, like Lorraine says, has just exacerbated that, to a whole new level. So I think that it's, yeah, in those environments, you need to have your support networks. And I think we're really fortunate at the club that we acknowledge that, it can be tough. And we, really work hard to make sure that, we support each other through that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things to pick up on something both you and Lorraine have now said is that the family I gained, for want of a better word, by being a member of the trust and a few other things. Although I live in Birmingham, actually, I feel all these people are always there to call on. Nicole and yourself, obviously, you spoke about it getting through your mum. I know you work tirelessly. Again, football a distraction or football a positive for you?
It's both. So while my mum was ill, it was, 6 months of full-time caring for her, raising four children, coaching football. It was a lot. And the one thing I had for myself was 2 hours at Carrow Road every couple of weeks and 2 hours up at the Nest for the women's game on a Sunday. It, I didn't think. I didn't think about who needed me, who wanted me, what was going on. I just lived in the moment for those couple of hours. But again, it makes me happy. Football makes me happy. Watching my daughters watch the football makes me happy. So it's both. It's a distraction, but it's a positive one. No matter what the result was, I might go home feeling a little bit deflated, but it was quite nice to be deflated about something that didn't, in the grand scheme of things, actually matter to my life, rather than the devastating things going on in my life. So yeah, it's both. It's a distraction and it's a huge positive. And I have met so many incredibly strong, inspiring people doing what I do, and I wouldn't have any of that without football.
And I think, and it's I think you're absolutely right that it is both and neither depending on the context and the situation. It is a distraction, but it is also something that we love, and that's why we do it. That's why we go and put ourselves through it. That's why we go and lose 7-1 to Colchester and we're still there. Um, I want, as much as I want to focus the meeting on all of this sort of stuff, unfortunately, with the way things are, we can't always avoid it. And I want to pick on, and Lorraine started it, and it was mentioned by a couple of others, is being women into football can only be at sometimes tough. I know that sometimes it absolutely has its positives, but it is a whether to the and unfortunately a large majority of people it's still considered a men's game. So your opinions are, and I've seen this, are sometimes dismissed for whatever reason, whether it's a good reason or not. It's irrelevant. What is it like going to the football? What are the experiences you've had, and how has that had an effect on you personally? And Nicole, I'm going to go to you first this time.
Well, obviously, we've built an entire campaign around that exact point, around that exact thing, about women not feeling comfortable to go to football, about not feeling comfortable expressing their views, whether that be in person or online. Some of the chanting, some of the online abuse that we receive. So I'm going to step, because there's other people who can talk about this, but I'm going to step away and talk of my experiences away from Carrow Road, away from an actual football game. I was in a pub watching the Lionesses play, and I was interviewed by Jack McLean at Radio Norfolk, and we did a whole 20-minute chat and everything, and I turned around and there was two men sat at a table next to me and went, "Oh, you actually know what you're talking about, don't you?" That one word actually went from a compliment to a sexist comment. Because if they would have just said to me, "You know what you're talking about, don't you?" "Yeah, I do." "But you actually know what you're talking about," is derogatory. As a
It shouldn't
female
be a
football,
surprise.
Yeah.
as a female football coach, when I first took over an under five, so these are 4-year-old children, on a Saturday morning, and I had parents, male parents, questioning my credentials, where I'd coached before, what experience I have to be training their 4-year-old sons. And I'm stood there thinking, one, your child is 4. As long as I can get them to balance and kick a ball, we're winning. And two, would you do that to a male coach? No, you would not. So it's not just happening in major football clubs. It's not just happening in the stands. It's all the way from grassroots and up, which is why we campaign so hard in grassroots as well as with the big clubs. So it happens a lot more than people think. And I think people think that we're campaigning against people shouting at us in the stands, the leery comments. We're not. We just want to be able to have our input in football and not be questioned, not be judged, and not be talked down to. And that's all we want. We don't want more than, we want the same as. And I think that's all we can ask for as women in football.
And so it's where I wanted to bring you in, and I was kind of clear about this at the start. Is like what I really want to know is from your position in the boardroom. Now, that's not directed at Norwich City; it's directed at because obviously you deal with other clubs as well, and you deal with other scenarios. Do you find you are? I mean, someone I know who used to run or used to be on the board of directors at Kidderminster. She always said she had to shout louder because otherwise she wouldn't be listened to. Now, that's one person. I'm not saying that's like everyone's, but what for yourself is it like?
It's a very interesting dynamic. I think probably because of the fact that I've been in and around the game for a long time, I probably feel, yeah, like much more comfortable now. But it was quite interesting. Earlier this week, we had like a championship call of all of my counterparts around the championship, and I am the only female. Which I mean I think is a sad state of affairs in this day and age, but and I think I've gone past like the sort of record. It was only because it was literally all on screen and I was like, oh my God, like I'm the only female. But I think previously I think maybe contrary, not so much about actually having to shout louder, but feeling comfortable and confident to speak up when you're in that environment, and that I think has been a challenge for me sometimes in those environments. If you've got big overpowering kind of sort of meetings and stuff, is actually kind of finding your voice. And then, like you say, having the confidence that you feel that voice is going to be listened to. And like I say, I think I've kind of gone past that point now, and I feel very, very confident and comfortable in those environments. But yeah, it has been a challenge to, kind of, I suppose, yeah, put yourself out there, because, I think that, for me, I think, well, if I just went, it's going to be difficult to achieve this, I'm a female and I'm not going to push myself, then, that doesn't set the right example for everybody else going forward. You want to be somebody that goes, no, like this is possible. But to do that, you've kind of got to develop a bit of a tough skin, and, put up some walls, and kind of, yeah, brush things off. I had a situation literally last season where I was in another club's boardroom, and one of their directors came over to our table and literally shook hands with the other 5 members of the exec team, got to me, turned around and walked away.
I
And
mean,
I'm
it's
like,
horrible, but I could see where
oh,
that was going, which makes it even worse.
yeah. And it was, like, and the I mean, the bit for me when I talk about support of colleagues is that actually it infuriated every one of those 5 colleagues actually much more than it did me. I think because I was a bit like, that happens. Like, they were so angry about, about it. But so, and that's where I think it is hard, because then you kind of retreat a little bit into a bit of a shell, because you think, am I not acknowledged or recognized, or, sort of seen that I could be in that environment, and, and that can sometimes be a challenge that you have to sort of fight against in your own head.
And Lorraine, on to you for this question as well, because obviously you've joined the trust relatively recently, as a board member. I would hope we've made you feel welcome, but in terms of how you feel, do you have the same confidence level that you need to have, or do you sometimes feel you're shut out when at the football? Do you feel your opinions when as Nicole was pointing out quite rightly, it's not just about being at the football or whatever, it's about being down the pub and actually feeling part of the conversation?
Yeah, when it comes to the trust, I'm heard. Um, I am opinionated. Nicole and David, you'll know that I have my opinions, and I'm not frightened at the trust. We're all allowed to have our views, and the views are not dismissed. Everybody's view is as valuable as everybody else's. Where I found it hardest was back in Alex Neil's tenure. I used to write an opinion sort of a blog post for the Pink 'Un, and I was so excited about being asked to do it. And after the first couple of times, and they'd put sort of a link on social media, and then the comments came, you're wrong. No, it's my opinion. You can tell me that if I called Alex Neil Trevor Neil, I'm wrong. But my opinion on how we're playing is an opinion. It's not, there's no right or wrong. And I found it really hard. And after that season, I actually gave it up because I couldn't cope. I fixated on the few bad comments rather than a lot of the people who agreed with me. I've actually grown a thicker skin since then, and I think it comes with age as well. I've now got to nearly 60, and I just don't care anymore really what people think of me. And there's this wonderful thing on social media called block. So it's you block. And I used to have every time I had an opinion, a couple of guys the same 2 guys would pipe up to tell me where I'd gone wrong, what I was saying was incorrect. I don't know anything about football. What do you know? You're a woman. And the best bit, I think, like Nicole's comment was like, you actually know. So I got friend of mine, he's a friend of mine, is called Paul. And he turned around to me one day and he said, for a bird, you don't half know about football. I think he was being complimentary, but it was the surprise that I'm a woman and I know about football. I knew the offside rule when I was 5. My dad drilled it into me. I don't, things like this, I've known all my life. but having that for a bird, and this was about 20 years ago, and it's still in my head.
I mean, I think the idea that men automatically know more than women about football is fundamentally flawed. I mean, my sister got me into football, so and she could tell you far more about it than I ever could. So I've been raised on the fact that it doesn't matter who you are as to how much you know. I noticed when you were called Bird, you know something. Nicole just hunched her shoulders slightly. Zoe, from your bounce back to you on the idea of social media, because as far as I'm aware, you're not on social media. I don't know if you are or if you have any secret accounts or anything, but I don't know how much you look at social media as a result, because I've seen lots of comments, some directed at the if we focus on the women at Norwich, on the women's team, on Delia, on yourself, that when the comments were towards David Wagner or Stuart or um, Michael Wynne-Jones, the comments are very different to when they're directed at you and Delia. And I don't know if you've seen any of them, and if you have, how whether that has any effect on you, or whether it's water off a duck's back because you're like, well, they've no idea what they're talking about. Like, how do you see those, and how do you feel
No,
about
I
them?
don't. And it was a lesson I probably learnt from Stu, to be fair, because he when he first came here, he looked at social media too much, and actually it had a really negative impact on his mental health. And so it's very much something, yeah, I don't look at it and I don't read it, because exactly like you say, so much of it is coming from maybe a place where somebody hasn't got all of the information that I've got, when I've made a decision. I think the one thing that I've really struggled with is when I just get called Webber's wife. And that has been kind of a big challenge for me, because it's always in a really derogatory term or a derogatory way as well. It's never in a positive scenario. And I think I've worked really hard, like I say, to carve out a career in this amazing industry, and for 25 years, and that's how I get referred to as, because I happen to be married to somebody that I work with. So that's been something that again, you develop a thick skin and you brush it off, but it doesn't help. It doesn't help when your confidence when you're going into work, and you're trying to lead people. You almost have to kind of put a mask on and a brave face, and sort of make yourself walk through the door. And that kind of thing is tough, and I just don't think that people think about it. I think that they don't think of the human being behind what they're saying. I think you become a character. And yeah, and I don't think people realize the impact of what they say on the people that they're saying it about.
I think a lot of the time they don't realize the impact, or they don't know there's an impact, and
No.
they're what we use the old cliche keyboard warrior, because they're some faceless person sat behind a computer. Nicole, on the subject of social media, you're a lot of the time very prevalent when you have the time to do it. You post a lot. You talk about Her Game Too a lot. You post about the women's team. You obviously run the Women in Football account. I know you've had it both ways, because we've discussed it and I've seen it and I've been interacted with you on it, in the fact that sometimes you have comments that are really, really kind of despicable and are just awful. But I've also seen you kind of try and take the power, and you've had comments, or you've seen comments, and you've raised the point and fought back against it. How frankly, sometimes, because that must get tiresome when you see so many things. Because it's not just the comments directed at you. You see a lot of the comments that are directed at the women's team, at the Lionesses, things like that. So
Yeah.
how do you just get the kind of, you have just had enough by that point when you start seeing this stuff?
No, I'm very selective about who I reply to. If anyone criticizes the way I look, the way I talk, I ignore it. Because at the end of the day, I don't know what you look like because you've got some random anime picture as your screensaver or some cartoon. Fine, whatever. Have at it. Not everyone's cup of tea. Don't care. When someone is factually incorrect and I know 100% that I am right and I have facts to back it up, I'll reply because it's an education and that's what Her Game 2 does. I have to speak back because I was given a platform to change football in a tiny little way. The tiny little bit that I do means something. And it's my daughters that I do it for. Because if I can change one person's view so that they don't have to go through it in the future, that's worth it to me. That's worth my energy. That's worth my stress, my mental health. But I'm very selective about how and when I use that. I won't respond to everyone because you can't fix stupid. But, if I can educate someone, then I'll reply. But if it's just going to cause an argument, then no, I won't. Like, the big example we were probably talking about was when England's men team got to the final and all the headlines were first England manager to reach this No, you're not. Serena Wiegman's done it. Put some respect on the women's game. And for me, that's important because you know how much I love Norwich City women. So I simply I didn't put anything about the men's team. I just put the first England men's manager to reach back-to-back finals. I didn't mention the women's team specifically. And the abuse that I received, women's football is not real football. Well, it is. And some men get very threatened that we're trying to take over what is their game when we're not. But we should enable ourselves to take up space because we deserve that. And I think listening to Zoe say that she was the one person I didn't shake hands with literally made my skin crawl because she is an incredible, inspiring woman in football, someone that I look up to because she takes up space. She uses her voice and she does it with grace, which a lot of people don't. So, yes, I will respond if I've got my facts right. But if they're going to just be picky and say I'm ugly, I don't really care. How about it?
I think the two parts that I want to just mention that you said that I think are brilliant. First of all, it's an education. That's the biggest part, and not trying to take the game away from men. And that's the whole point of the two at the end of Her Game 2. It's not Her Game instead. So, um, I want to move away from football slightly to a more general point in the fact that we've obviously focused a lot on women in football with this call and stuff, but mental health in general, we all have bad days. And one of the things I absolutely want to do with this and with the other videos I've done is try and tell people they're not alone, try and tell people that other people feel this way. We all have bad days. We all do. Some have them worse than others. Absolutely fine. When you guys have a bad day, what is it that helps you? What is it that you try and do? Do you know you're having a bad day? So I'm going to pick on you again, Lorraine, first. Do you know
Well,
what helps you? What do you try and do?
right. I'm going to start with an uncomfortable subject, which even some women don't talk about. And my mother's generation didn't talk about menopause and anxiety and mental health issues that come with menopause. It's not talked about, but anxiety is a huge symptom of women's of menopause. And I struggled, and I hit PTSD as well as having anxiety at the same time, which was dreadful. And I took time out and I volunteered at an animal sanctuary and cleaned out cats and took dogs for a walk because I couldn't deal with people. So that's something a lot of women don't know it's going to come to them. They'll hit sort of around about 50, and I hope they don't get awful anxiety and depression and everything that comes with it. But it is something that needs to be talked about, and it seems to be, men don't want to talk about it, or no, that's something a woman's issues, and women didn't talk about it. So I was really surprised when I ended up going to the doctor and he said, no, this is a common symptom, and tried to put me on sertraline, and I said no, and I found time in nature, and I now do some photography, sort of really amateur photography, and I find that when I need space, when I need to clear my head, I'll go off on my own with a camera and spend time with bird watching or something like that. But yeah, there's mental health isn't talked about enough, but certain women's mental health is not hardly talked about at all, and it's seen almost a stigma about, certain women's problems as such. So yeah.
I think that's a good point. So we talk about men's mental health because apparently men can't open up. And there's this idea that men need to talk because they don't. But that kind of, to me, a lot of the time, from some people, implies that our women are fine because they can talk. That doesn't mean they do or feel they can talk about some things.
Yeah.
And I think all of the stigma that we have about the causes behind poor mental well-being individually, there shouldn't be any stigma behind them. If something is causing someone a problem, we should be able to help. We should be able to talk about it. Zoe, from your point of view, when you have bad days, and I don't know how frequent they are, they might be daily, they might be annually, I don't know. When you have a bad day, what helps you? What do you like to do? How do you spot the signs?
I think I probably take it sort of a little bit of a step back, and this is something I've learned about. I've suffered with my mental health previously, and that was very much around kind of taking the weight of the world of everybody else's problems on my shoulders. They'd offload onto me, and then I'd be like, I'm absorbing all of this. Where do I go with this? And now you expect me to fix it. So I think understanding what your triggers are really helps then to be able to manage your mental health. And I kind of have gone right back to basics and kind of have, like they'll laugh at work because my diary has literally got like this whole framework. But, for me, it is about, prioritizing sleep. Like, that can have such a massive impact on your mental health, so actually like that's a huge priority. Movement, I do, a lot of yoga, a lot of Pilates. We have it like teachers come into the club as well, and run classes, just that moment where you're moving, but also your brain's switching off. And I think that's really key. For me in my world is just quiet, a moment of, someone not asking something of me, me not having to be something to somebody else, just actually having time for me. I think that's really key. And then food as well. I think really prioritizing nutrition, feeding your body, feeding your mind, is really, really key. So I kind of try and build out sort of frameworks that I know can kind of keep me in a steady state. And then if I, am having a bad day, actually it's not, I can quite quickly bounce back up from that. And I mean, another thing, we do a lot of at work and massively advocate is, like get out, like Lorraine says, in nature. If I'm having a catch up with somebody, well, let's go and walk by the river and do it. Let's like get some air. Let's, be in nature. Like, we don't have to sit in a meeting room with no windows, and actually, like that just can have huge benefits, and an impact on your day and on your mood.
I like the idea of the statement you said there about not sitting in a room full of windows as well when the necessity is there to do something. Just slight tangent, it's quite funny. My line manager at my work, we're a bit of a startup, so we've got the traditional pool table downstairs. We'll go and have our meetings around the pool table rather than sit in a room and just feel stressed. Nicole, Zoe mentioned there about, and I do not wish to speak on your behalf, but Zoe mentioned there about being the weight of the world and looking after everyone and being the sounding board for people. Have you got any idea what that may be like?
No, obviously not. So this is something that like not a lot of people know this about me. So my history with mental health is vast. I was diagnosed bipolar when I was 15. So I've struggled with my mental health since probably puberty is when it started rearing its ugly head, and I was a mess. And I had all the wrong coping mechanisms: drinking, boys, smoking, shopping. I was young. I didn't know what to do. I'd been told, well, you've got this thing wrong in your head. And I just thought, well, I was broken. That was it. Like, I'm not going to be able to do anything. And I had my first child when I was 18 years old, and nothing else mattered. Because whenever I was having a bad day, there he was. So for me, I lost my father and had a traumatic birth experience within 5 days of each other 6 years ago, and again fell apart. PTSD, year-long therapy, but I did the work. It was the hardest thing I think I've ever done in my entire life. But anyone that thinks that therapy is something to be ashamed of is completely the opposite, because it is strength. It is knowing that there is something you can't control and you're letting it control you, and therapy is the way out of that. So now, as you say, I get told off quite a lot for always being the yes person. Will you do this? Yes. Will you do this? Yes. Will you do it? Yes. And it was actually, so for me, I love helping people. It's just part of who I am. So the volunteering, the Thursdays at Duncan's Club, which people say is for them, but it's not, it's for me. I absolutely adore it and I love them to pieces. And it was a couple of weeks ago, so Mum had just passed, and I saw Ian Thornton. And he was like, how are you doing? I was like, I'm okay, yeah, we at Duncan's Club on Thursday. He was like, Nicole, how are you doing? And I said, I'm fine. He was like, but what are you doing for you? And he looked at me and he said, what are you doing for you? So I joined a gym. And I used to hate the gym with a passion, and now I love it. I get up, I take the kids to school, I go to the gym, and like Zoe just said, it's something for me. And I'm exhausted afterwards, but I also get that high now from it, which I never ever thought I'd say. But I do. I look forward to going, even when I get home and I'm hobbling around trying to make dinner for the kids because I'm in so much pain. I still get up and do it again. So my coping mechanisms have changed over the years. So now it's my children. Like, I look at them, and could I imagine ever getting to that point again where I left them without me? It wouldn't be for me. It's for them. And I'm sure, David, you realize this now that you're a father. Like, you would never want to hurt your child. So you find other things that will help you to help your child. So it's my kids and the gym now, apparently.
Yeah, and again, we're more here to listen to you guys, but on that subject, I've been very open about my struggles. I wrote the piece the other day, first suicide prevention day. I do all these videos, and I'm very open and honest. But I have my bad days, and I've had bad days in the past. I am. It was brought up to me the other day, because we were talking about it, a friend of mine, how much better my days have been since the birth of my son, because I look at him and he'll smile at me, and there's nothing else that matters. So I don't have the my own time to kind of delve into my problems, which I dwelled on before and I would worry about. I now look at my son, and everything else is forgotten. It's not like I use him as that. It just is. So I absolutely get that now. I mean, I've all, my nieces and nephews I love beyond measure. I jump in front of a bus for them if I have to. They're amazing. But my son is there 24/7 for me to just play with, enjoy, and just know that I would do anything for him. So on your children being your focus, I totally see it. Absolutely see it. I want to as well, before we finish the call, there's a couple of other things I want to ask, but especially the one thing I definitely want to get to, because I always ask it, is we have now more resources than we ever did before, both in terms of there are just more resources, but also the resources to help people are more prevalent. Nicole, you said something interesting about therapy shouldn't be looked down upon. I've always found it interesting that if I came to you and I opened up to you and I said, I'm Nicole, I'm really having trouble here, and I told other people that I'd done that, everyone would be, well done, you spoke, well done. But if I went and told people I was seeing a therapist, immediately there's a different connotation to it. So my question to you guys now is, what is the advice if you knew someone that was going through something, or if you're talking to someone that knows something, what would you advice would you give them to help? What would be your piece of advice, either based on your experience or your, I'll say your desire. I'm not sure that's the right word, but what would you give them? So, Zoe, I'm going to come to you first on this one because no, what would you say to someone if they were struggling?
I think, yeah, we've been through this, quite a lot with, with colleagues at work where, sometimes someone will just open up, and I think that, yeah, there is no stigma. Well, there might be a perceived stigma, but I think actually genuinely, like, people, don't think people just want people to be well and be better. And that's, a human trait. Yeah. Like Nicole says, you want to help people, you want people to be happy. So I think that, yeah, it's trying to ignore, what other people might think, and absolutely put yourself first. And I know, we've got colleagues at the club who have, put themselves in a really vulnerable, open position. And actually, two in particular that I've kind of been on a bit of a journey with, like, they are two of our most impressive colleagues. Like, they are flying. And actually, because almost in a way, because of the issues that they've had, they've understood themselves so much more. Like, they know, how to be strong, how to manage themselves. Actually, like, sometimes you reflect and you think, actually, they're stronger human beings and have more capability now for having gone through that experience, whilst it's, really tough and really hard. And I think it's people, knowing that actually, like, this isn't, the end. This is, something to work through, and it's a tough time, but absolutely, like, you can come out of this the other side, and, and be, it can be a really positive thing as well.
I think to me, you hit the absolute nail, and I've used it in a lot of things. It's not the end. No, 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 no bad feeling you ever have, however horrible it might be, and I do not wish to take away from how bad these feelings might be. It is never the end. There is always something on the other side, and if you're if you genuinely feel you are at your lowest, then literally it's only up from there. So,
Yeah.
Lorraine, yourself, any advice you would like to give that from your experiences that you think might help someone?
Talk. I mean, I mean, my best friend from school committed suicide. She didn't talk. She bottled everything up. There was a trigger that she felt that she had no way out. But if she'd have just picked up the phone, if she'd have just had a chat, we could have said, this isn't, there is life, there are other things you can do. There is a way out of the position she thought she was in. Talking helped me an awful lot with my PTSD, especially. I was very lucky. The police got me a counsellor within a week. I was sat with a counsellor, being able to talk about what I'd seen, and I can actually talk about the accident now without being a complete mess. So I found not everybody has the luxury of being able to find a counsellor, can find a mental health professional, because it is hard to get in to see somebody. But social media can be an absolute awful place, but social media can also be a fabulous place, because when you say on social media, I'm struggling, I'm going to still call it Twitter, I'm sorry. It's there's been a lot of, people I follow on at Norwich City have had a couple of times where people have gone, I'm really struggling. I've gone and messaged them and saying, look, I'm here, my DMs are open. This is my number if you need to talk. There's always somebody, and there's always somebody who will listen to you. You might not know them in the flesh, but just talking, just actually physically writing down how you're feeling sometimes helps. Just getting to express how you're feeling, not bottling it up. I think that's the big thing. Don't bottle things up.
Yeah. I say that in all of my videos because when I went through my struggles, I didn't talk, and that was the single biggest problem. Because the moment the, lucky's the wrong word, but I'm lucky that my attempt didn't work, and the next day I spoke to my friend, and she shouted at me, but she didn't shout at me in a way that made me feel worse. She didn't shout at me for trying something. She didn't shout at me for being an idiot. She shouted at me because I didn't talk to her. That was
Mm.
it. That was what she was upset with. Nicole, we've spoken a lot in the past about advice that we may give to each other and other people. For anyone that may be watching this, what's your advice?
I just want to touch on something Lorraine just said about, access to mental health care. And as we're talking about mental health and being women in mental health, when I went through my birth trauma, which is classed as a female, obviously, issue because I gave birth, the cutoff from perinatal mental health support is 12 months. That is it. If you don't get in with a perimental health team within 12 months, you have to start again, which happened to me. 14 months from my PTSD it took until I got my first. I had the appointment. I went through everything. I had to spill everything to this person, and they went, "Yeah, we're going to get you someone." And they rang me up a week later and went, "Oh, sorry, she's left." So I just have to wait for the next person to come along, and that person never came along, so I had to go on the wellbeing service. But that's not the only way you can get mental health support in Norfolk, especially as we're talking about football. The CSF do a walking football mental health on a Thursday. The FDC also do a very similar. It's sport to get you moving, meet new people, but there's mental health support and charities that will also be there to point you in the right direction. So I would say to someone, which I have said to my friends before, yes, talk. But if you feel like you can't talk to someone that's close to you, find one of these services, because I'm sure my husband won't mind you telling me he's struggled mental health wise because he's looking after his dad who's got dementia. So he goes to walking football at the Nest on a Thursday and he gets some of it out on the pitch, and then they all sit around and they have social time after and they talk to each other. And it's a big group. I think there was 25 different people there last week. So look, reach out. And if someone is watching this video and isn't sure where to look out, reach out to me and I will tell you where to look for it. Because it is so important that as a football family, which is what we are as Norwich supporters, as lovers of football, we all support each other. So it doesn't matter if I know you, it doesn't matter if you're a stranger, it doesn't matter if we've liked a picture on Twitter and that's how you know me. I'm there if anyone needs to reach out. And even if they don't want to talk to me, I can show them who to talk to.
And it's what we do with the Canary Trust Mental Health. Myself, Nick, and Richard, we're not qualified. We don't claim to be. We're not experts. We're just people that have experiences. We'll happily talk to people. If you need proper help, we'll absolutely signpost to one of the organisations. We're approaching the end. We've been on this for 50 minutes now. So I want to thank you all for joining and for giving it the time and for doing this, what I consider a hugely important subject. But I cannot let you go without one last thing. And this is directed at you, Zoe. And more specifically, directed to you and the club, because one of the things that I am incredibly proud of to be a Norwich fan, and it was amazing, was every year for World Mental Health for at least the past 3 years, Norwich have done something quite big. There was the kit release with Stephen Fry narrating it. There was obviously the incredible impact video last year that I had people contacting me who had nothing to do with football whatsoever, going, "Have you seen this video?" It's like, "Yes, I've definitely seen the video. Don't worry." It's like, "Isn't it amazing?" It's like, it is. It's fantastic, and the awareness that it raised, and the spread that it had, the reach that it had, and the impact that it had was fantastic. So, from my point of view, it's a huge thank you to the club for doing stuff like that. What does it feel like at the club when something like that hits and it helps so many people?
I mean, that the video last year was, yeah, overwhelming. I mean, like, we had a letter from Rishi Sunak. I had a personal letter from Prince William, kind of commending us on the work that we've done. And no, I've never had letters from prime ministers or princes when we've got promotions. So that shows the impact of what we've done. It is something that everybody at work is hugely passionate about. Like I say, I'll have moments sometimes, I'll go to the training grounds and 2 or 3 people will come up to me and go, "Look, I just want to raise this person. I'm a bit worried about them." And like, people are so quick to act and talk, and it's a very open kind of topic within the club, and work really hard to try and create that forum. But yeah, I mean, I was sat down with Gavin, our head of marketing, concept and plan for this year. We're never going to be able to deliver what happened last year, but we will continue to try and move the dial, and raise awareness, and as football clubs, we have a responsibility to try and use the power of our voice and our badge to raise awareness of these things. And I think you'll know from last year, I think that video had an initial 7,500 inbound calls to the Samaritans, off the back of it. It's so important, for us to continue this work.
And I think, and as I say, I want to end it by commending the club on doing it, because it is important work and it clearly had such an impact. I mean, it would be that 7,500, which is for the Samaritans. That doesn't include the people that contacted the other resources. Obviously, you think about what could have happened if they hadn't seen that video. It's just it's such a wonderful thing. Um, as I say, thank you so much to all three of you for joining me. It's an incredibly important thing for me. I think it's necessary to raise both the side of mental health and women in football. You've taken time out of your incredibly busy days. I know all three of you are how busy you are. So I do want to thank you so much for doing this. To anyone watching, I hope that this has helped you in some way. I hope that it's given you some advice. I hope that it's just been interesting to listen to. It certainly has from my point of view. Um, there will be some resources and numbers that you can call if you are struggling. My DMs are always open. The Canaries Trust is always open. The CSF is always available to you. Please just talk. And again, once again, to my guests, thank you so much for joining. Thank you.